Welcome to the Courage Never Quits podcast, where members of the West Point class of 1986 tell their stories. I'm your host, Paul LaFontaine. As always, the views expressed in this podcast are those of the participants and not of West Point, the Army, or any organization. Let's go to the podcast. Bobby Lockett, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, my friend. How are you?
Good. It's such a pleasure to see you. We just ran into each other at West Point a little bit ago.
We did. I think it was at a football game, maybe
Yeah.
one or two of them.
That's good to see you, man.
Yeah.
What? So where are you in the world now? Catch us up.
Well, I am actually in between two places,
Okay.
between New Jersey and St. Louis. I just took a new job as the chief people officer at
Right.
Schnucks Market, which is a grocery store chain that's been in business since about 1939.
Okay.
And it's known for its great values and its customer service,
There you
believe
go.
it or not, in the grocery business. So it's pretty cool that I got a chance to land that opportunity. It takes me back to the St. Louis area,
Yeah.
which, many people think they know St. Louis, and I'm from that area, and I didn't even know these certain parts of St. Louis. So I can tell you more about that as we go along.
Because you're
So
from the area. You're from East St. Louis.
I'm originally from East St. Louis,
Mhm.
and I will tell you, it's a great place to be from. It was interesting. Tony Guzzi asked me, he says, "Hey, man, I heard you got the job at Snooks. Are you going to go back to your hometown? It'd be a great 30 for 30 story." And I go, "Tony," I say, East St. Louis is a great place to be from. I mean, it's like Afghanistan. It's been bombed out and depleted. So there
Right.
is no way in hell that I would go back to East St.
Right.
Louis. Now, I'd go back to visit, and I love the people there. They're wonderful
Yeah,
people,
of
but
course.
it's just not my kind of place, to be
That's your
quite
kind of
candid with you.
place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's. We have a lot to talk about. It just in looking up a few of what of the things you've been up to. You've had a really great run. But we'll go all the way back to East St. Louis. What was it about the military academy that got you interested, or what turned your head in that direction?
Yeah, well, there's a story behind that before I got to West Point. So the story is, I was in eighth grade and doing what typical eighth grade boys do, and they're on the phone. Back in that day, it was a landline, of course.
Sure.
And my sister is at home with me, and she wakes up from this dream. It's about 12 o'clock,
Yeah.
and she goes, "Wake up, stop, get off the phone. I need to talk to you." My sister's about 9 years older than I am. And she
Uh-huh.
said, "I had a dream about you. I had a dream that you went to a military school." And I go, "There is no way in the hell I'm going to a military school." She said, "No, seriously, I think it'll get you out of this neighborhood." And I go, "No, I'm not doing it."
Yeah.
So she says, "Listen, we really need to think about this." And so I did, okay. And she's my big sister, and I love her to death. And she passed away not too long, about 5 years ago.
Ah,
But,
sorry to hear.
and so on top of that, we broke out our Google of the day, which is the Encyclopedia Britannica. And I said, "All right, I'll go to a military school under one condition, as long as there are girls there too." And so she said, "Okay." So we pulled out the encyclopedia and we found two schools.
Right.
There were military schools that were close to the St. Louis area. One was actually Culver Military Academy.
Yeah.
The other was Missouri Military Academy.
Mhm.
Here's the distinction. Culver had girls, and they had Culver Girls Academy. Missouri Military Academy didn't have girls. And I go, "Okay, done deal." So we drive up to Culver, and we do our exams and all of that stuff. And the next thing you know, the dean looks over and he looks at my mom and goes, "Your son did really well on the entrance exam, better than most here, I assure you." So next thing you know, my freshman year in high school, I'm going to Culver Military Academy.
Really?
So
So you
yeah,
went to military high school.
1 year, only 1 year, because we realized how expensive it was. And of course, being a kid, this is really my first time away from home,
Yeah.
it's a lonely, lonely trail to sort of
And a freshman
blaze.
in high school too. That's young, right?
Exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
but I met some great people
Yeah.
there as well. And then, of course, what I appreciated about it was that meritocracy and,
Hmm.
the idea of, hey, if you earn something and do it, you get it. And
Yep.
so when it was time to pick colleges, when I went back to East St. Louis, it was, pretty interesting. And I was like, I really did miss that experience. I love the structured environment, and that's really what piqued my interest in military school. But then, in high school, man, I remember a counselor, a recruiter coming from Harvard, and he
Yeah.
and I asked him. I said, "So how much does it cost to go to Harvard?" And he said, "Oh, it's about $50,000 a year, and this is 1981 dollars."
Yeah.
And I go,
Right.
and I'm sitting there looking at him going, and it doesn't compute. And I'm going, wait a minute, people pay that kind of money to go to college? I'm like, oh my gosh. I said, that's more money than my mother has made in the last 2 years.
Yeah, yeah,
And I go,
yeah.
there's no way in the hell that I can go to a school like Harvard, right? And so I knew that I didn't want to burden my mother, which is why West Point became of
Yeah.
interest to me. Now, one more quick backstory to this
Sure.
is my dad was a World War II vet,
Hmm.
enlisted in the Navy at age 14. And during that time, of course, blacks could only be cooks or stevedores. So he
Yeah.
was a cook because he was small in stature, again, a 14-year-old kid.
Right.
And he absolutely revered Douglas MacArthur because he was in the Pacific and he thought MacArthur walked on water.
Yeah.
He thought he did. And so when my dad was sick, I was about 10 years old.
Uh-huh.
We used to watch old war movies of Douglas MacArthur, and he revered him. And I said, "Okay, wow, that's pretty cool." So that was always in the back of my mind. So when it came time to go to schools, certainly West Point was top of the list for that.
Well, on the unusual bingo card of unusual experiences, having a
Yeah,
year of high school military school as an inspiration for going on, that's the first time we've had that. That's great.
yeah,
So, planted the seed and then the MacArthur connection. So in high school, were you
absolutely.
an academician? Were you an athlete? What was it that had your resume stand out?
A little bit of both. I
Hmm.
was a decent athlete. I can't say that I was the best athlete because just imagine my hometown,
Sure.
per capita, I think we produce more players for the NFL and than any other place. And and I'll tell you one other interesting story. One other
Sure.
tidbit that I tell people about is when I was a kid. I got my shot blocked in basketball by this lady, right? And this girl, when she was about 2 years older, and I was, of course, when you're kid, 11, 12 years old, and you're playing against girls back in that day.
Right.
Well, she scarred me for life. And it just so turns out that the girl that I was playing against was Jackie Joyner Kersey.
Oh my goodness. All
So
right.
she
Yeah.
blocked my
Well,
shot. It made me feel pretty bad about myself.
but in
But
the long
then
run, what a story.
yeah, but here's the funny part. So we get to West Point. We're at Buckner,
Yeah.
and Pam Pearson blocks my shot, and I'm going. I think I'm going to stop playing basketball after that. But again, it felt pretty good because it was Pam, and
Well,
Pam
Pam
was
was in my company.
arguably
She was a tremendous athlete. So you
absolutely,
could still keep your
absolutely.
dignity with those two blocking your shot.
Right, right. So it was a combination. I can't say that I was the best at anything, but
Right.
I think I was fairly well rounded. I was a decent athlete. I was a decent student. I took all the college prep classes,
Yeah.
all the AP classes. I worked during the summers. I even went to took college classes during the
Okay.
summer as well. So it was a combination of things. And I had no plans on doing 20 years in the military. That was
Yeah.
never part of the plan, to be honest with you. So high school, I knew. I mean, I was one of those kids that knew a lot of people, and part of
Hmm.
that was because believe it or not, Paul, I went to 12 different schools before I graduated from high school.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. And
Yeah. Yeah.
and part of that was just my family was fairly poor. There was not a lot of wealth.
Yeah.
And in fact, I don't think we owned a home, after my dad died. So it was just one of those situations where you do the best you can with what you have.
Hmm.
And I just so happened to be a decent student, and a decent athlete, and I got along well with most people, and they always put me in different programs. So
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Now, did the 1 year at Culver help you for prepping for our day and all that? I mean, did it actually give you a little bit of an edge on that, or how did that work?
Yeah, you know what, Paul? It did in
Yeah.
many respects because I knew how to tie shoes. I mean, shine shoes.
Yeah.
I knew
Yeah.
how to march. I knew how to salute. I knew all the facing movements. And of course, I'd been hazed before. But you also have to remember, my neighborhood, we called it playing the dozens, and you got teased about everything in your life.
Yeah.
Whether you're fair skin or dark skin, whether you got big ears like I have or not, whatever the case may be,
Right.
you get prepared for those things. You have people yelling at you and you have people laughing at you, so you just become immune to it at a certain point. And that's what happened for me at our day, that it wasn't that big of a deal. So I was there, got to my room and helped other people.
Oh,
So
that's great.
it
Okay.
was not that big of a change for me.
Yeah. Well, that worked out then. A
Yeah.
little bit of prep. So How would Beast barracks? So that did it last at all, or did Beast kind of how did Beast hit you like right off the bat?
Listen, I had a lot of fun at Beast, actually, if you could say that. Uh, and one story I will tell you is being at the table. I think Steve Cannon and I were in the same squad, and there were a couple other folks at the table. Like I think Phil Biggs was there, and there were a few other folks, Jimmy
Uh-huh.
Diorio and John McHugh. And I remember, um, we had one dinner in the mess hall. We were at Beast. We had fried chicken. Now,
Uh-huh.
kid from East St. Louis, I'd never eaten fried chicken with a knife and fork, as I'm sure many folks didn't, right?
Right.
So here we go, and I'm looking at the chicken, and
Right.
I'm thinking about, I'm looking at my classmates around me. I'm like, what the hell do I do with this,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I pick it up and take a bite, right?
Hmm.
And so, the table commandant tells us to cease work. He says, "New cadet Lockett, what are you, an effing chipmunk?" He said some other things, that I won't say because it's going to a broader
Right.
audience.
Right.
And I'll go, "No, sir." He goes, "From now on, you cut your effing peas in half." And I
Oh
go,
boy.
"Okay." So my classmates are taking food and sticking it in their pockets for me, so I would have something to eat because they were
Right.
like, "Yeah, wow, he really screwed up that time." So,
We all had
um,
to relearn a few things when we went
we
there, right?
did, we
From
did.
uh,
So then when we were out in the field, it was, again, we sucked together, and it
yeah.
was, it was an experience for all of us. And, I remember digging foxholes and, being paired up with Linda Fetco,
Right.
who happened to be like, what, number three in our class.
Yeah. Yeah. She was.
And yeah,
I remember she just would rocket by me in different engineering classes and different classes, so she was always moving
yeah,
up the chain as I moved
yeah,
down.
absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. We'll get to that later, but I'll tell you about, thermofluid dynamics when we get to cadet experience,
There you go.
and what they did to me, just to see how tough I was, right?
Right. Right.
But Beast was, there was nothing spectacular about Beast. It was,
Hmm.
we were all in it together. I mean, it was a learning experience for us, and we had the partner to do things, and we learned how to work as a team. And I think we all did that. And
Yeah.
yeah, it was tough running and doing all those things, but yeah, it was
Now
a
you
new
ended up on the
experience.
front end of First Regiment in C1 as a plebe.
I was. Man, you did your homework, dude.
Well,
I'm
it's
really
all out there.
impressed. Yeah.
It's all out there. What was that like? First Reg. That's
It, by the way, we had a really good time. In fact, I was talking to Teddy Hoyt, a time ago. We had a squad leader, Mike Kershaw, he was a good guy,
yeah.
when we were in our company. And Teddy and we would always go on these spirit missions. He and I stayed in trouble. I thought I was going to fail out. I mean, I failed my first class ever, which was computer
Really?
science, and I had to go to STAP. I was like, thank God for STAP.
You had to go to STAP for computer science.
Yes,
Oh.
yes. Oh yeah.
Oh.
It was brutal. It was brutal. But
Golly.
I had a really good time. But yeah, we had a really good group of folks in the company, and my roommate Ed Bruno, and I got along really well. And then I had Ted Dow, who is an ex-86er,
Hmm.
called Chico, and we had Dave Gordon, who
Yeah.
was also my roommate as well. And so we had a really good time. We stayed in trouble. We befriended the BPs, by the way, in C1. So
Good
we had a
strategy.
lot of parties in our room because the BP would bring us Jack Daniels, right?
Oh, look at that.
Yeah, and he would store it in. He would stick it in our medicine cabinet for us, or hide
Yeah.
it
Well, that
for
takes the
us.
edge off plebe year.
Yeah, it almost did until we almost got caught.
Well,
During
there's
plebe
that.
parent week, right? So I never got caught for having, it was funny because the OC that came into my room was actually was my P at the time.
Okay.
And I was like, thank God, because we had the doors closed. There was about 10 of us in the room, and we're drinking. We've got our solo cups out, it's mixed company, and we're all sitting around going, "Oh my God, we're all gonna get kicked out." And then, of course, right after that, the next 20 minutes they do a health and welfare inspection, and I'm
Right.
going, "Oh boy!" But they never saw the alcohol because my roommate decided to stick it right under the top bunk, right? And if you even looked right at it, but the guy who came and did it was about six
Too
six,
tall to see it, right?
too tall, and he didn't see it. I was like, thank God. That was all I
Clever
needed.
strategy. Clever
Yeah,
strategy.
absolutely.
So, did you ever get in formal trouble, a little area time at that early stage, or did you get away with it?
Yeah, I was a century man for sure. Yeah, so I stayed in trouble. So, listen, some of my best friends are all century men, right?
I tell you what kind of trouble would you get in? Because there's
It
different
was,
types.
yeah, it was more nickel and dime trouble.
Yeah,
Oh, you got an
late
84 for
here. Yeah,
this. Yeah, I don't think I was ever late or ever missed an assignment or missed
right.
turning anything in, but it was always these little things. Like one time I parked my car at Clinton, Clinton Field,
Yeah.
and had these yearlings that were in my company go get it because I was in I-4. I said, hey, go get my car for me, and park it at, they took it from the lot and took it to Clinton Field. And then, of course, they
Mhm.
get caught. The you know, our tag, the regimental tag wants to give me a first class board for it. And I go, what? I go, sir,
Yeah.
come on now. Listen, at the end of the day, there are guys who got DWIs or guys who had accidents and did some pretty serious stuff. I just want to make sure that the punishment fits the crime.
Right.
And so essentially that negotiation tactic worked. And I wound up getting like a 15 and 20. And then the next week we had somebody came and gave us amnesty. So I was on
Look at
cloud nine
you.
for sure. I was
So
like,
you have a little
yes.
luck as well. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I'm probably the luckiest guy you'll meet, man. So,
So, but now C1, you went from C1, then over to I4.
yep.
So
Yep.
Rich Gabalden and the whole group over there. I looked up some of the names there in I4 back in the lost 50s, right?
Yes.
How'd you find
Yes.
that transition?
We we were, put it this way, we were pretty rowdy, and we had a
Yeah.
great group of people. Eric Scheidemantel, Pete Kim, Rich Gabald, Barry DeRuza, John Boulay. Who else was in that company?
Sully
Mike
was in your
Bertha.
company.
Yeah. So we had some really really good people,
Yeah.
and we stayed in trouble because we were
I heard
always trying to
about some of
find
the
a.
hijinks going on back there in the lost 50s.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't stay in trouble because I tried to avoid it as much as I could,
Yeah.
from the lumberjack story to,
Well,
you know, all those other things. Doug Pavick was in our company too, so, and
yeah.
Tom Smith, Smitty was my roommate.
Yeah.
Um, and so I had some pretty good roommates,
Yeah. Yeah,
as
well, a
well.
very
So
different experience. I was in C4 just across the way there. It was a
yeah,
very different experience being back there, tucked back in that corner, right? So,
yeah.
back in those older buildings is a different living. Literally, your lifestyle was different living in the older buildings.
Yeah, let's just say we snuck out frequently. A few of my
Yeah,
friends were always in the tunnels, in the steam tunnels. We would have, because we're so close to being, just being off campus, if you will, girls would come and pick us up. We take off, we leave our cards unmarked, so to speak, and we were off to Newburgh or to the lovely town of Highland Falls.
now we didn't come across each other very much at the academy. You were in C1 and I4. I went C4, I3.
Yep.
But the one memory I have of you is you just always had people around you, and you're always not holding court, but you were always in the middle of a group of people. Every time I saw you, you were always you. So when you say, yeah, the social aspect, I get it, right? So that's very much how I remember the few times we encountered each other. What did you end up studying? What was your course of study?
Graduation. It was my course of study. So at the time, I was trying to figure out the path of least resistance.
Yeah,
And I almost accomplished it because initially when I got to the academy, I was like, I'm going to be a computer science major.
yeah,
And just imagine this is what we were being talked about, hey, this is the future. If you do this, you'll have a great opportunity. And I
yeah,
absolutely hated every minute of it. And I was like, yeah, there are no people involved in this.
yeah,
So how do we get along with this? And so essentially, I remember us being HPA or MSE, as I
yeah.
recall, those tracks. So I took the HPA track, which was more about leadership studies. So that was my area of concentration.
Okay,
But I do have to tell you the story about my experience with thermofluid dynamics.
let's hear it.
So I think we took a cow year,
Right.
and I walk into the classroom. I'm like, oh, who's in my class? I go, Mike Pompeo is in my
Oh boy.
class. I'm
Yeah,
like,
that's a
Ulrich,
bad, that's an
wait,
indicator right there.
right, Ulrich's in that class. And I'm going, okay. And then there's Linda Fetko, and I'm going,
Right.
why am I in this class with these
Yeah.
people? So this is section one, and I'm going, why did they put me in this class, right? And then, of course, the P in that class, who was a professor for that section, was number one in his class. And I'm going, I know what they're doing. They're going to screw me with the curve. They're going to be curve dicks. So, and I'm going to be the one holding a freaking, holding a pot of,
You're
gold
the
or whatever,
rocket fuel that's going to get them higher in
Oh
the,
my
that's
gosh. So like, well, he only got like a 50 and I got a 90, So,
right.
um, so
There's
needless
Tim
to say,
90. There's all these, yeah, right.
yes, yeah,
And
I
they're
think Tim
all
may have been in that class too. I mean,
right.
so I'm in there going, I'll be damned. And the guy's like, he could have been speaking Greek to me. And I was like,
Right.
okay, I have no idea what he's talking about because they got it. I didn't. So after the first exam, I go
Yeah.
from section one to section 12.
Right.
Right. And the beauty of it
I've done
was
that. I know what that
yeah,
feels
yeah,
like.
you know what that feeling's like, right?
You feel that breeze in your hair,
Yes,
right?
you're like, I mean, what was beautiful about it, though, Paul, to be honest with you, was
Yeah.
I had a professor, I think it was Nino Cerruti, um, who made moments seem like I could get it. I mean,
Hmm.
he talked about he made a very set of complex principles very simple to me that I could get, and I go, man, I freaking absolutely love that guy. Um, Fast forward the movie when I took command, he was actually in a sister battalion or so,
Okay.
and I got a chance to reconnect with him and really thanked him for making thermofluid dynamics easy and understandable, unlike the initial professor that I had with Mike and those guys
Right.
who made it extremely difficult for me.
Right. It was a nice landing pad in section 12.
It was. It really
I
was.
remember that. I mean, I had that a similar experience in math.
Yeah.
Anyway, so you're the first person we've had on who was in the gospel choir. Talk about that a little bit because we've had some glee clubbers on. Talk about how you got involved in that.
Well, first of all, I can't sing. So essentially, if you can't sing, I remember going through this line of beats for Glee Club. They had to
Yeah.
sing a few bars, and I was like, "Yeah, next."
Yeah. Right.
So, um,
Ouch.
but in all seriousness, the gospel choir was actually pretty cool. It
Uh huh.
was an opportunity to stay connected to the community in which I grew up, because I grew up going to church, and
Sure.
not that I'm more spiritual now than I am religious for sure. But it was an opportunity to stay connected with what you knew from home, and it was a little piece of home
Hmm.
for me because of the trip sections and the music, the gospel music that I grew up singing and listening to, and my mother played all the time, and my
Yeah.
dad was in a choir early on, and so it was a feeling of being at home,
That's
and
great.
it was also fun to go in these trip sections and go to
So
these
you
churches.
all
Yeah.
did travel.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we traveled quite a bit.
Right.
One of my favorite trips was we actually took a gospel choir trip to California, thanks to Isla Tatum. Um, she is class of Isla's 87. Her mom arranged a trip for us to go out to California to do a
Okay.
gospel choir trip, which was fantastic. That's where learned how to make my infamous gumbo
There you
that
go.
I've been making the same way because of her dad
There
for the
you go.
last 40 years. But it was an experience of getting, us a chance to stay connected to the Black community too, to help,
Yeah.
so they see cadets, they see people that normally they wouldn't see in uniform.
But you were active in a few other things. I just looked in the howitzer, the current affairs forum, things like that. How much of that kept your time, or was the gospel choir one of the main things you did?
Gospel choir, if you want to throw in the contemporary affairs seminar, that was really about staying connected and dealing with contemporary issues of our time, so to
Hmm.
speak. I remember we had a speaker one time, Sugar Ray Robinson came to speak, which I thought
Hmm.
was pretty cool. But a lot of it was really about the parties. We had some epic, epic parties, that I got the chance and privilege to be the one who rode the bus down to pick up girls from the various colleges and bring
There's a
them
theme
back.
here. I love it. There's a
Yes,
pattern
yes,
here.
exactly. And so that was a lot of fun, man. You know, we would do our quote dealing with these issues, but at the same time, it was a very social organization, and it was not, you know, as you know, it was open to everyone. We had
Yeah,
everyone that would come to some of those functions and parties, so we had a really good time.
that's great. And then,
Yeah,
so that was there any other activities that really took your time? Because a fair bit of
yeah,
studying
yeah. I
across the
played
park.
150s plebe year.
Yeah,
And that was, you know, I wasn't going to play anymore after that. And then I started boxing a little bit.
yeah. The boxing
Yeah,
was mentioned.
yeah, yeah,
Talk about that a little bit. Was that company level or talk
yeah.
about that?
Company level, and then I got beaten in brigades, and I lost a fight in New York City. I think it was first a year. Mickey Haydak was with me, and there was a guy Tony Emmy. No, it was a junior year. Must have been junior year. And we went to New York City. We had a fight at the New York Athletic Club.
Really?
And I recall having these old shorts on, those, you know, silk looking shorts
Right.
with the Army, you know, West Point logo, and we had those boots on,
Right.
and I got pummeled. And I go, you know, I think sometimes it's better to be a coach than it is to be a player. And so I coached like three guys who won brigades that year, and then
Oh,
I used
that's
to,
good.
yeah,
Okay.
coach Terrence Green. He and I, you know, I coached
Yeah,
him
yeah.
and sparred with him quite a bit, and he wound up winning brigades, and then he also, I think he may have won an NCAA title as well for his
How did
weight
that?
class.
There was a boxing club that would go out and fight other.
Yep.
Talk about that because I don't think we've had it. Todd Gah was on talking about
Yeah.
his his meteoric career in boxing, but there was a club that went around. If you went to New
Yeah.
York City,
Yeah. So we fought in the city. You know, we fought in other places. Todd probably picked it up, came a little bit later, but
yeah,
we boxed against each other a little bit. But yeah, Terrence was really a great
I
boxer. He had the
remember
heart
seeing
for it.
his bout.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I think he
Remember
may
that?
have boxed. He boxed Todd boxed some guys that I was coaching. And
Yeah.
you know, I love Todd, but yeah, I think we had a better strategy. I'll just say, I'll make it easy for him. So when Todd's on, he can bust my chops about it too. So
Well, maybe we'll have like we should get a, panel on with all the boxers together. You guys
yeah,
could talk it up. You could do the glare at each other. I guess that'd be
that's
funny.
right. But you know, so boxing just happened because I was always fascinated with it. I always had pretty quick hands. But I do remember as we were doing this boxing team thing, uh, Mr. Creighton, remember Herb
Yeah,
Creighton?
yeah,
I think Creighton had been at West Point since like the 40s. And
yeah,
I got to tell you, he was the toughest guy I'd ever met in my life. He would always, well, if I'm throwing a punch, he was like, he would give you instant feedback. And
yeah.
I use these stories when I talk to people about feedback. I was like, Creighton would give me instant feedback. If I drop my right hand when I'm throwing a jab, he would hook and hit me. And I mean, he's like, fair enough,
There's
more,
your
and he'd say, look,
feedback.
bam. I'm like, I say, Mr. Creighton, I'm not so sure you're supposed to beat up cadets like this, are you? He goes, you'll learn your lesson, Bobby. You'll get it. So I'm like, all right, okay. So he's a wonderful guy, though. Wonderful man.
Amazing. And then the field artillery. What was it that drew you there? We talk about the choice of field artillery.
Well, I think it was less of a choice. It
Well,
was, you know, I did help our classmate Bill Ward, rest his soul. Uh, I played a role in helping him achieve status as the GOAT. Because what we should have been studying, we were partying and hanging out. Um, but so for me, I would always be like Dean's List before the term ends, and I would never study for the term ends. I was like,
mhm.
okay, well, how many points do I need in order to make it through? So net, I didn't apply myself academically until later in life. But what was also
Right.
really cool about this was um, going FA was the best thing for me because I didn't like walking as much as the infantry guys did, and
Yeah.
I was like, well, if you're going to be a combat arms, of course, then field artillery was the right one because
Yeah.
you got a chance to do quite a bit. And got stationed at a lovely place called Fort Polk, Louisiana. Never
Fort
thought I'd,
Polk garden
yeah,
spot.
yeah. Just to show you how naive we were, we like, yeah, look, it's only how many miles is it from um, New Orleans? We're going to go to New Orleans on the weekend,
All the
right?
time, right?
Yeah, no, it was actually closer. It was easier to get to Houston than it was to get
Right.
to New Orleans.
And as a
Um,
lieutenant, you don't go anywhere. I mean, you're
right,
got every
exactly.
duty in the world. You right? We
That's
were like
exactly
45
right.
minutes from Savannah, and we never got over there.
Right, right. But we had a really good time. We had a good crew of folks.
Yeah,
Bob Knapp and I were in the same unit a couple times. Steve Boykin was there.
yeah,
Who else? Billy Walter was there. So we had a good crew. Edgar Pygott was there. And we all actually lived around the corner from each other. And so growing, that was fun being a lieutenant there. And we had a blast, absolute blast. We would compete in sports. We were like, okay, we're going to have like a derby. We're going to go, all right, we're going to compete again in tennis, basketball,
that's great. Yeah,
golf, swimming. So we're doing these round robin things. Me, Bob Knapp, and actually Torrey Crawford came a couple years later and was part of that crew. We're on the same battalion.
now,
Did the fire
did
support
you
battalion
bunk
too.
up with some classmates that it's an often unrecognized and great part of our history is that when we're all lieutenants, we ended up sharing a house with a bunch of classmates. So how did you guys organize it at Fort Polk?
Yeah, Steve Boykin and I were roommates. Until
Yeah.
he introduced me to this lady who became my wife, who is now my ex-wife. So I blame Steve um, for
You
introducing
thanked
me
him,
to
or maybe you
her.
didn't.
Right. I was like, yeah, thanks, Steve. I appreciate that. 2 kids later, and it was
Yeah,
it's just one of those things that happens.
yeah, yeah. Okay. And then, but you stayed in for 9 years. If I
I stayed in for 9 years.
okay, talk
So
that through. So
yeah.
first, which kind of unit were you in when you started?
So we're in fifth Mac down at Fort Polk,
Hmm.
and I was doing cannon artillery. No, actually, I started on a tab battery, which is the target acquisition
Yeah.
battery, as a platoon leader, and then got moved to be a fire support officer, and then from fire support to being the platoon leader for a heavy platoon, which meant that we had nuclear weapons, the
Really,
155
you one of those
SPs. Yeah.
folks? Yeah.
Yeah, so it was really cool because I mean, there's a lot you had to learn, a lot you had to digest, and then as I took over that, I became the XO for that battery as well, which was really cool.
Hmm.
And then, of course, we went to the advanced course, and the next thing you know, I had orders to go to Germany. Desert Storm happens, or Desert Shield begins, and they walk into our classroom. It was me, T. Williams. Who else was with us? JT, John Thompson,
Hmm.
and a host of our other classmates. And he said, "Hey, I got good news and bad news. The good news is you guys are going to graduate early. The bad news is you're all getting deployed and you're going to be CONUS replacements." We're going, what the hell
Right.
is a CONUS replacement? Right.
Yeah.
So we got sent to different units. Um, and the experience is very, I would say it's humbling when you get a chance when you're in country and you see the devastation that's caused by the work that we did. And it was massive. I
Yeah.
remember uh, uh,
Which unit did you end up with?
so I wound up with the 42nd Field Artillery Brigade,
Hmm.
229 out of Baumholder. So they sent me to an artillery brigade, and then we were providing support for part of the big right hook, I guess. Is it? Yeah, yeah, big right hook that
Yeah.
was
Right.
taking us into Kuwait. So I also did some liaison work with the British artillery unit that was there.
Okay.
So I did the liaison, we did the battle handoff with them.
Now you
Um,
guys. So a lot of our classmates were in these replacement units. So
yeah,
because there was an anticipation, they anticipated we'd have more folks lost.
casualties. Yep.
But you ended up actually in a unit that was doing some firing, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So my first as soon as we got in country, my first job was to shoot a battalion three, which is what, 54
Yeah.
rounds. So that was pretty interesting. It was good times, but it is. And that was, many
Yeah.
moons ago. And but you also felt the repercussion of the 500-pound bombs, and
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was just an incredible experience.
Yeah. So you went for the training, you graduated, you're an officer, and you did your bit, right? Because you went over there, and I was to your west over there, but
Yeah.
we all pulled our share. And so what? So that was year 5 and 6ish. Year
Yeah.
five. What? But you had four more after that.
Yeah.
Your LinkedIn says operations research. What was going on there?
Yeah. Well, you talk about other mistakes. Excuse me. Other
Right.
mistakes in life, right? Um, so I went to Germany after that. And of course, before I left the army, I wanted to command a unit. That was the most
Mhm.
important thing. I was like, I want to command. I got to command, and got a chance to do it with an MLRS battery, which is
Okay.
exactly what I wanted to do. What was interesting, quick story. There was this guy that JT introduced me to, who happened to be Ray Odierno. And he says,
Ah.
Bobby, you should talk to Ray. He can bring you down here, or you can get command a unit here. So what did I do? I told Ray, Colonel Odierno at the time, he said, "Sir, I want to command an MLRS battery. I've done cannon artillery, but I want to do this MLRS thing." And he says, "Why would you want to do that?" I go, "Because I just saw the awesome power of it, and there's not much more I can learn by going back and being in a regular artillery unit, in a 155 unit." How naive I was at the time. Now, mind you, had I gone to work for him, and taken the path that JT had taken, I may have stayed in the army.
Yeah.
But
Right.
I didn't. But we all make those choices in life, right?
Yeah.
Um, so I wanted to command, and then of course they said pick your functional area, and I'm going, I don't really know anything about this, and I'm not even sure I'm going to stay in long enough for it to really matter. So essentially, they gave me a link, and I put down a list of things. I was like, I don't even know what this stuff is. So ops research was one of them. They go, oh, great. He's got, look at all this math stuff that he took. He'd be great in this. And I'm going,
He'd be
why would
great.
they do this? I felt like I was going
Look at
back
that
to that
computer.
thermo
He distinguished
class.
himself in computer science. Bring him in.
I'm like, are you kidding me? And so I get this ops research job. And instead of them sending me back to grad school initially, they sent me to where we go? Fort Lee,
Okay.
Virginia. Jimmy Jenkins was in that class, as I
Yeah.
recall. We had a couple of other classmates there. We had Herm Asbury, who was originally class of '85 there. And I spent more time sleeping and hanging out than I did worrying about what was going on with ops research. So I learned, I
Right.
mean, again, what was interesting though, you realize. Even though I was not a star man at school, but I did pretty well in many of those classes because it was all math. And I'm going, yeah, I've seen this stuff. I know this stuff now. So this is the
Mhm.
third iteration of seeing it. So it
Yeah.
wasn't too bad. But, like most things, I was like, yeah, this is probably not my forte. Rick Gronemeyer was there too, as I recall. I
Okay.
think yeah.
Well,
So then
so
I
in the
got,
fullness of time, with
yeah,
a little maturity and you focus, we all actually do much better with different tasks than when we were
yeah,
19 years old and wanting to get on the bus to go find out where the girls were.
that's right. That's exactly right.
Not that I ever went on that bus.
Right, right, right. Right.
Anyway. Oh my. So a little Fort Lee for a little
Yeah.
operations research training, and then was
Then
there an assignment after that, or were you getting
Yeah,
toward the
then to Fort
nine?
Leavenworth, Kansas,
Okay.
which, interestingly enough, when I look back on this experience, it was actually pretty cool. We got a chance to, the team that I was on worked on the package that in which the unit deployed with to Somalia, based on the enemy. So we ran this computer simulation called Vector and Commander, in which this is pre the commercial internet, in which we got a chance to do research and say, okay, well, what kind of systems will this kind of force have? And then you put it into this big model, and it spits out, the right equipment package based on the terrain, the type of
Yeah.
enemy you're facing, and the like. So it was really cool to see that work. But yeah, it's not something that I really enjoyed, to be quite candid with
Yeah.
you. And then they offered, I guess, the VSI SSB back then, and there were two folks that got it in operations research. One happened to be me. I don't remember who the other
And
guy
what is that?
was.
Just the VA for the
Yeah, so it
kids at
was
home.
the special separation benefit, or the
Okay.
voluntary separation incentive. I guess they had
Yeah.
two.
So the
One was
chance
a
to
lump sum, but the other was, hey, take it over a period of time. So I
got it.
took it. I volunteered and said, yeah, I mean, I'll take it. and
Yeah.
I luckily got it. I was like, okay, cool, great.
And so,
Then
what was
I
your
could,
thinking
yeah.
when was it a snap decision, or were you kind of thinking about it for a while, getting out? Where was your head at that time?
Yeah, after command, my image of a 40-year-old guy was always the major out in the field, cold, rainy, and wet. He hasn't
Mhm.
shaved in like a day and a half, and he, is just absolutely miserable because he's only had like 3 hours of sleep.
Right.
His kids don't know who he is. And
Yeah.
so I said, is that the life you want to be a staff officer, or have you achieved what you wanted to achieve? And for me, I'd done what I wanted to do.
There you go. Okay. Now, family wise, you said you had some children by that
Yep.
time. How was that shaken out? And I know you have a son who just went to the academy for the summer program. We're going to talk about
Yeah.
that, but talk about your first two.
Yeah. So my older kids, I have a total of four. My oldest
Four
is
kids.
Brandon. Yep. He
Okay.
was born at lovely Fort Sill. Then there's Rob, who was born at Fort Polk, and
Okay.
then there was Brianna, born at Fort Polk, and then of course got remarried, and I have Aiden now, who
Mhm.
is the 17-year-old who
Whose career
funny.
we've all been watching on Facebook. So
Right,
he's probably the
exactly.
most known. He's the most famous of the four. The
That's
other three are
exactly right.
equally fascinating and important, but
Right.
Aiden gets a lot of airtime.
He does. He really does. And so that's the family. We've been in Jersey for, I guess, the last 10 years. Um,
So are you
yeah,
commuting from New
yeah.
Jersey to
The
St.
St.
Louis?
Louis. Yeah, I have an apartment in St. Louis, and I
Okay.
fly back on the weekends until Aiden graduates from high school.
Yeah, fair
So
enough.
yeah,
All
depending
right.
on what he does with his life.
And at
So
that point, your nest is empty, and you decide where your nest goes for
absolutely. Well,
sure.
we're definitely going to sell the house in Jersey. There is no doubt about that, man.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just time to go.
All right.
But if you want to talk corporate stuff, I can,
Yeah, yeah.
because
Let's hear about that
which
because you've
is
had a very fascinating run
yeah,
um, on the corporate side. Talk through how you got kind of the path to get into becoming basically a string of chief people officer roles.
yeah,
Talk that through.
yeah. So it started. I got when I left the army, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I actually had a job to go into commercial real estate, but I didn't understand
Hmm.
it well enough.
Yeah,
And then I had Mike Devereaux, who's class 83, convinced me to go to work for a company called Lucas Group. So I started recruiting JMOs, and I go, this recruiting thing's kind of fun because you're convincing people to do something. And I go, yeah, I can do this. It was 100% commission. We did really well. I was like, wow,
hmm,
this is great. But I was like, yeah, but what's the path forward?
right.
So I stayed there for about 4 years. Said I went back to grad school part time, and then said, I think I need to get some big company experience, and I went to Frito-Lay,
Yeah,
and worked there for about 3 years. I got hired by a guy by the name of Ron Porter, who's class of '81, who's still a really good friend to this day. And had a couple of roles there. Saved the company $1 million when it came to recruiting fees early on in my career. Got promoted, and then I had
that'll
a
help.
yeah, I know, right? And then I had a mentor who's since passed away. He was actually the head of HR for Frito-Lay, Ron Parker. Ron played football at TCU, was just a phenomenal guy, took me under his wing. Um, and he said, hey, what do you want to do? And I said, look, I'd love to be a head of HR one day. So, all right, well, you need to get some experience in the field so you understand how to deal with all the complexities of being an
Right.
HR leader. And so I took his advice and went to a manufacturing facility at Frito-Lay in Dallas, and of course worked in the heat because there was no
That's the
AC.
field.
Yeah, right, exactly. Making potato chips, watching people do these things, and it was a learning experience. But I wasn't sure if that's what I wanted to do, and so of course, our classmate Bill Noble called me. He was at Harrah's at the time, and said, "Hey, you ought to consider doing this. We can get you into this GM associate program, and you could potentially be run a casino." And I go, "Ah, this seems exciting." Not thinking the whole thing through. I go to Harrah's in Kansas City as a GM associate, and I did a couple of really cool things that I have to tell you about. And this is trying to put some of that ops research thinking
Yeah,
to work, believe it or not, or just problem solving in general. So one of the things that I did that people talked about for years was I got the chance to help reduce smoking at one of the restaurants in the casino. So here's what happened. So we got rated on all of our customer service scores based
Right.
on whether or not we got, good ratings or bad ratings from our best in players. But every Friday night there was a buffet, and at the buffet, the diamond players would be in one line. You would let one diamond player go, and you had to let three gold players go, right?
Right.
And so, but when the time happened when you went up to the receptionist, she would then ask you for your smoking preference,
Right.
and they said, all right, whether it's smoking or non-smoking. So I did this time and motion study and noticed that the people who smoked, regardless of the type of player they would go eat. I mean, the seafood buffet on a Friday night in Kansas City was a big thing at the
Yeah.
time. Then they would come back, have a cup of coffee, smoke a cigarette, then they go eat again. Then they come back and have a coffee and smoke a cigarette. Well, the objective is to keep them in a casino, right? So if you could turn the tables faster, what do? You get more people back to the casino. They spend more
Right.
money, and we do well. So net, I convinced the folks there, and I said, "Listen," I said, "why don't we eliminate smoking?" And the first thing that they said was, these were all industry veterans. They said, "Bob, people come to the casino to smoke, to gamble, to drink. They want to pursue their vices." And I go, "That's great." I said, "But they can do that in the casino,
In
not
the
in the
casino, you
restaurant."
can smoke.
And
So
they
you,
go, "Oh, that's a good idea. Well,
you
maybe we can
eliminated the
position it as a
coffee.
food." Exactly. So we were able to do that. So that was one cool thing that I did. The other was, I
That's called,
created.
the kids these days call that choice architecture. There's
Oh, is
your
that right?
architecture. You want a
I've never
cigarette, you
heard
go to the
that.
casino.
Yeah, yeah. That's funny.
I love it.
Yeah. And one other thing I'll tell you that was really cool there
Yeah.
was, um, I created this thing called the Customer Service League that married front office people, i.e., if you're a beverage server or a
Hmm.
blackjack dealer, with back office folks like finance and HR and operations. And I created this Customer Service League based on fantasy football. And then we would get these customer service scores every Tuesday. And the guy who was running it at the time would always say, "Hey, we need to improve our customer service," but he never laid out a plan to do it. I said, "So maybe," I said, "here, let's try this. Why don't we make it like fantasy football, in which these scores are converted to something that's like a football score, and then we can have different departments compete against each other. Now they've got an incentive to want to
Yeah.
beat someone else." And I would write these fictitious stories about, players and coaches, right,
Right.
that tied these teams together. And every Tuesday morning that we get the scores, and I convert them, and then I'd post these stories. And so it spread like wildfire. People
That's
loved
great.
it, and we had this big CSL trophy and presentation. We kept it
Yeah.
in the
Yeah.
dining facility, so everybody played a role in it. So it was a really cool thing,
So
and
how
it
did
did move the
you,
needle. Yeah,
where do you think the inspiration for these kinds of ideas? 'Cause that's a pretty keen appreciation of the way people work.
yeah.
So like the smoking thing was like just kind of getting the pattern that not everyone is able to do that. Where do you think that comes from, or what is that just what you naturally do?
Yeah, it's a natural thing for me, Paul, to be honest with you. I try and observe things and see things in motion.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then I try and apply things that may come from a different walk of life,
Yeah. Yeah.
to
Right.
those situations based on what I think the need is in that particular organization. That same approach wouldn't work everywhere, but
Right.
you know what I mean?
Right.
But if
Right.
you take the time to observe and say, okay, how do you make an impact and how do you keep people engaged in what you're doing? Excuse me, then you'll have the option to say, yes, it really made a difference. And oh, by the way, I can see the results from it as well. So it's just by observation, applying things that might work in a certain situation, because everyone's going to come back and tell you about, oh, by the way, the data says we should, that we're off. And I go, that's
Right.
great. What are you going to do differently? And if it's no plan to do something different, then you're going to get the same outcome over and over again.
And so how did you go from some of those great projects back into pure HR? Because you,
Yeah, I
I mean,
wanted to get back into HR.
you
Yeah,
rocketed back up into pretty high levels there.
yeah, went to Limited Brands in Columbus, Ohio, and I will tell you, Limited Brands, I had two roles at Bath and Body Works, as the director of HR for the creative functions, and then I was the head of stores HR for Express. And the good news is, everywhere I've gone, I've always taken one of our classmates or two with
Oh,
me.
really?
Yeah, so I've always had the privilege of work for the most part of helping them. So Bill Noble. worked
Hmm.
at Limited Brands, and as did Larry Hughes. Dennis Weiss was there around the time, but he's 85. So
Uh-huh.
a few of our classmates worked there. But
Yeah.
but again, at Bath and Body Works was the first time that I worked with um, a leadership team that was led by all women. And
Sure.
it forced me to reconsider my positions on a lot of things. And even
Sure.
there was a lot of the LGBTQ community there as well. And I had
Sure.
never worked with those folks because I had been in all male dominated environments. So it
Making
for
potato chips.
exactly making potato chips
Right.
or poker chips.
Yeah, yeah, or
Um,
poker chip. Yeah,
right.
exactly. Right.
And so then you go to an environment in which you observe. My observation was that the ladies that I worked with, they led a little bit differently. They listened more.
Hmm.
They were much more collaborative, and they didn't pound on their chest,
Right.
to prove that they were the smartest person in the room. They were very sensitive to the needs, and so this idea of EQ, for me, was born out of observing women in the workplace
Yeah.
and how they had to deal with the various challenges that they dealt with at the time. And so I was very appreciative of it because it forced me to step back and say, wow, you can't, you have to step back from your biases and you have to think
Yeah.
differently and you have to be open to accepting all people because they can add value if you treat them the right way. So great lesson learned for me. So I was there at Limited Branch for 3 years. And the issue for me there was I recall being at a meeting and we were talking about some customer feedback, and the feedback basically said, "Oh, your pants made me feel great." And I went, am I doing the right thing now? Because there was no connection to a higher purpose for me,
Yeah, yeah.
which was something that I really needed as I look back over my career at that time. When you connect me with a higher purpose, I tend to stay at those organizations. And so I got
Sure.
recruited to go to USAA at the time
Yeah.
and had,
All that.
several roles there. And that was part of that was because I was looking for, again, higher purpose that we
Hmm.
all had when we felt like we were on active duty, we were doing something more meaningful, and it worked out really well for about 8 years there. I repositioned quite a few things. I led the veterans hiring initiative before it was sexy back in 2010.
Yeah, yeah.
And in addition to that, I set up their talent management programs. I also had a role outside of HR, working with the American Legion in all of
Hmm.
the service academies, primarily for the marketing of credit cards and insurance for members who didn't have it. So a lot of the sponsorship stuff that we were doing at the time got involved in some of that.
Yeah, you make a really good point about that purpose, and it's a theme through all these discussions with classmates, and we all had that almost overwhelming sense of purpose when we were young, and it really pulls at us. And so when people having jobs that don't have any connection at all, it feels very much more hollow than it might for others. But so it's a really key point, particularly as
Yeah,
we all look at retirement, right? So
absolutely. Well, and listen, I want. I mean, some of the other jobs they were decent. I mean, the ADP job was really cool too, and I can tell you more stories about um, taking over talent and taking over diversity post George Floyd, which was very interesting. And
boy, that must have been a
yeah.
frothy time, right?
Well,
Yeah,
let's go. Let me just tell you,
yeah, yeah.
kind of the story about that, and I was head of HR for a company called Hall and Clark in San Antonio after I spent about 8 months at First Data. Culturally, it was not a fit for me.
Yeah.
That's why I went to there, and then I got recruited to go to ADP, and I started out, head of HR for the small business solutions, which was the fastest growing area of the company, and then
Hmm.
got promoted to be the chief talent officer, and then they added diversity to my title, and then they added the ADP Foundation to my title as well. And what was interesting when I took over is this is post right after George Floyd, and I had one of my peers was in the role. She wound up leaving the company when I took on the role. And what I talk to people about is, this idea of diversity, we've got to ensure that everybody feels included. And
Hmm.
what I often felt, and I would say, what about the white guys? People would look at me like, hey, yeah, but this is not about them. I go, it's about all of us. None
Yeah,
of
yeah.
us can succeed if we don't do it the right way. So I said, well, there are two things that I want to do. number one, I want to change the narrative around diversity. I said, I'm not a social justice warrior. That's not my job. My
Yeah.
job is to make sure we figure out a way to leverage talent to make money. That's what and we're in the business of doing, and we do that by servicing our clients. And so, what I talked to people about during that time and shortly thereafter was, you know, let's look at how to break this cycle. And here's how the cycle goes, Paul. It goes like this: there's always a catastrophic event that happens, and following that catastrophic event, there's moral outrage, there's a
Hmm.
commitment to do better, there's progress, and then there's complacency and then backlash.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you think about that pattern and you see it over and over again every 10 to 20 years in our country, you can take it back to the Civil War,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you can fast forward to George Floyd. So what I talk to people about, I said, if we reframe the argument and we make the argument about economics, would that change everybody's perception and would people think differently? And I said, but it all starts with a great opportunity, with a great job. If you have a great job, then one of the things that you're able to do is that you start to demand different products and services. You may, if
Hmm.
you're in a community, you may say, hey, look, by the way, we don't have a Starbucks, or I need a dry cleaner, or I need childcare, whatever the case may be. It
Right.
starts there. And then once those basic needs are met, companies either are created or big companies come and meet those needs that you may have. Okay. Then, of course, what you want to do as a business is capture, that business. And at ADP at the time was like, look, if more businesses are created, that means more payroll for us. That means more
Yeah.
money
Yeah.
for us. But any business will capitalize on that economic cycle. I said, the beauty of capitalism is that the pie expands. It doesn't contract. It's not you versus me. It's all of us because if we have the opportunity to meet the demands of the market, then guess what happens? Growth, and
Yeah.
everybody benefits from growth. I said, but when you convince people that they're fighting against each other, then there's no growth opportunities for the markets because people
Hmm.
are too busy thinking about this versus saying, hey, what if I created this new idea? Or what if I met this service or I provided this need in my community? And so that's the way I would talk about diversity because I used to tell them, even 3 years ago, they asked me, what did I worry about most from diversity? Equity and inclusion. I said, DEI fatigue. People are going to get
Yeah.
tired of it, and it's going to feel like you're forcing things down their throat versus us finding a way to sustain efforts to make sure that everyone got a fair shot. And that's really what it was all about. So,
Well, being at the head
yeah,
of people in large organizations, you've been at the pointy end for quite a few years here. So,
yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
It's been fun, man. And listen, the one realization I have is retirement is probably not in my future
yeah.
because I'm, still full of piss and vinegar,
Okay.
to
Nothing
be
wrong with
blunt.
that. Yeah. If you're having
Yeah,
fun, that's great.
yeah,
That's
and I'm still having a
terrific.
good time. And I think, but you talk about this idea of purpose
Yeah.
and also being values driven. I left a company. I was the head of HR for the CAE, the company that we built simulators and trained pilots. Um, and I can say this because I'm no longer under an NDA. But when you work in an organization and the values don't align
Yeah.
with who we are, um, it creates a problem for me. And it created a challenge for me because of the way in which the organization operated, and the organization being CEO and the like.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, great company. However, when you allow um, certain things to happen, I mean, think about the hottest thing happening now: the CEO at the astronomer CEO with the head of HR. Again,
Right.
you've got to remember your role. We're about upholding standards, and when you work with somebody who doesn't uphold standards, it
Yeah.
is a very, very difficult place for me to be. And they're
Yeah.
not
I think
values. If you're
that's
not values driven, it doesn't work.
particularly with our shared background coming up, values and mission all part of the central core of what we learn to do and be. What is it
Absolutely.
about the people space that gets you the juice, that gives you the juice? I mean, is it recruiting? Is it policy? Is it what is it that really gets you going with this line of work?
Yeah, I think it's the ability to understand talent, Paul.
Hmm.
In addition to that, understanding how the systems are supposed to operate. And if you think about the systems of HR, like talent
Hmm.
acquisition, well, that's an important piece because you've got to find the right people with the right skills. It's about how do I keep them there? Well, you keep them there by developing them and giving them something to believe in that's typically bigger than themselves, right?
Right.
These are all things that are directly related to the Army. And I still believe, and by the way, I love the underdog. I love
Hmm.
people who are scrappy and who have grit because I'll take those folks any day over someone who had a 4.0 GPA from,
Sure.
Amherst. And for me, it's always been about finding that diamond in the rough, giving them an opportunity because that creates loyalty. But at the same time, you also have to pay them right. So you've got to understand the dynamics of pay and compensation. In addition to that, at the end of the day, companies want to win. People want to win. Nobody
Sure.
comes to work and says, today I want to do everything possible to screw it up for you, to make it hard for you, so
Right.
we can fail in our mission to service customers.
Yeah.
Right? Nobody ever says that, but life gets in the way, and I think there are times in which we need a little bit of empathy for people. And the thing that attracts me most about this is if done well, the people practices of an organization will be a combat multiplier.
Yeah. Right.
If done poorly, it is a distraction, and it's a turnstile in which you can't sustain performance over time. And
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
for me, it's always been about if you have the right people practices, they have the right spirit and motivation, they understand what's expected of them from a value standpoint and from a work delivery of outcomes standpoint, then the system works as intended.
Well, it sounds from your description, it still has you deeply engaged, and you'll be cracking at this for a bit now because it keeps you engaged, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, that's why I can never retire. Look, I
Right.
still I still work out pretty much literally every day.
Well, you're
And
looking good. That's great. Yeah, you're looking healthy, and
yeah,
that's super. And so you mentioned when Aiden moves on the next phase, you guys will relocate. Do you think? Where do you think you'll? Do you have any ideas where you'll find as home? I'm recruiting you for the next local club, right?
yeah,
The
right, right.
the
Um, Two
society.
things. Yeah, two things. I have a place in St. Louis, and I'll have a
Okay.
place in New Jersey. And I never, of all the places I've lived, which has been about 20 different places, I never thought that I would like New Jersey. I made fun of guys like Jimmy DiOrio, and like, hey, what exit? Ha ha ha! And now, ironically, I'm in Jimmy D's hometown,
Right.
which is pretty funny. But it's because it has such great access to everything. I mean, I was just at the beach down on the
Yeah.
Jersey Shore, and we had a phenomenal family time. I can go skiing. I can get to West Point in an hour. I can go to the
Yeah. Yeah.
city. I can do all the things that I want to do. And oh, by the way, I can take a train down to DC, whatever the case may be. So it's pretty cool.
Okay. So
Something
you may
between the
stay
two.
in the area.
I will. I'll be
Okay.
here, primarily 3 days a week, and I'll be in St. Louis 4 days a week.
Okay. Got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I live in the traveling lifestyle.
Oh yeah.
So you talk about being a lucky guy throughout your career, and certainly in the Army. And then afterwards, is there, if you went back and gave yourself any advice at any period, is there anything that you'd steer yourself differently, or do you feel like it's basically gotten to a good spot?
Listen, I'd be foolish, Paul, is to sit and tell you that. No, I do it the same way. Absolutely not. What? Only, listen, only a knucklehead
That
would
computer
say,
science
right,
class.
right, exactly. I think as I look back, um, I would have focused more on academics. The
Yeah.
one thing I did do somewhat well is build great relationships with a lot of people. So I've got a
Hmm.
broad spectrum of a network that I
Yeah.
love, and it's from every different walk of my life, whether it's business, whether it's West Point, whether it's other places too. Um, I think I would have built deeper relationships with many of our classmates because the irony is we didn't really get to know each other until way after West Point.
Yeah.
which is the funny
Right.
part. And you would think that we would have spent the time, to get to know people and spend, go places with them and get exposed to different things.
Right.
But I do think I would have spent more time getting to know people early on because those relationships really matter and they're important to me even to this day. And then the other thing I would have continued to step outside of my comfort zone. Here's what I mean. We were cadets. Uh, I got offered, hey, why don't you come and play golf with us? I go, are you crazy? There's no way I'm going to play golf. That game's boring, right?
Yeah.
I love golf now.
Yeah.
I wish I'd been smart enough to play it early on. Same thing with skiing. I didn't ski until I was 30. And I'm
Yeah.
going,
Yeah.
why did I miss out on an opportunity to learn it, earlier on? And
Yeah.
so part of that is because sometimes we get in our own way and we have our own models that we've made up. And you realize that the world's a big, beautiful, broad place. And there's opportunity for us all to expand beyond where we are, and I often talk about this in terms of cultural dynamics too, Paul, about how do we get people to engage with each other from different backgrounds?
Hmm.
Well, I like to do it through food because I am certainly a foodie. I love to eat. But at the same time, if you take the time to listen to their stories and understand who they are,
Hmm.
you realize that we have much more in common than we do apart. And you realize that, yeah, we might not have to agree on everything, but at least we learn how to appreciate a different perspective. And I think,
Hmm.
some of that is the lost art, particularly in this generation. So,
Yeah. This is a time where a little of that medicine would certainly help all of
yeah,
us,
absolutely.
for sure. Terrific stuff. What haven't we talked about, or what do we have not had a chance to cover that you want to make sure that the classmates here, because this is the preamble for a reunion, so people watch it and get caught
Yeah,
up. What
yeah.
have we not covered?
Um, I think we haven't talked about spirit missions that Teddy Hoyt and I did, but we'll save that for a reunion and a
That'll be
cocktail,
over
right?
a cup of juice at the reunion.
Yeah, exactly.
I will say, Aiden just finished the summer leadership program at
Oh, yeah,
West Point.
yeah. He actually rolled his ankle playing basketball,
Okay.
which is pretty funny. That he was there, and I'm like, why did you go out and play basketball? And now his football coach was mad at him for a little bit
Yeah,
too.
yeah. Now,
But
those programs are a gateway to harder stuff. Is he thinking about the academy, or where's his head?
he's thinking about it. His primary purpose in life right now, he wants to play college football.
Okay.
So we just went up to Amherst. We went to Trinity, and he's at a couple of other D3 programs looking at him. And I said, look, you're not the biggest guy, but you've got a lot of grit, and you'll do
Yeah.
well. Have a great season. You never know how it may turns out, and if you don't get recruited right away, then go play hard, ball out, and then you never know what options may present themselves. But I told him if he goes to West Point, he should go to prep school. Um,
Is that right?
for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, you definitely got to go to prep school. I wouldn't recommend anything other than that for you. And that's
Yeah.
one
Yeah.
of the things you talk about regrets. I wish I'd gone to prep school. I was so immature at the
Yeah.
time that if I'd had that one more year of maturity, it may have changed the dynamics for me.
It's funny when you look back from our graceful age. A year of extra prep seems like a great investment. Where back then it's like, I don't want to be behind.
That's
Right?
exactly
But
right.
like,
By the way, I had to tell you this story
yeah, yeah,
because it's so recent. So we're down at the Jersey Shore, and Aiden has a group of kids that he goes to Seton Hall Prep with. And one of the things that I told him when we started doing this about 3 years ago is, hey, here's the rule. If you no means no, of course, I'm giving them some
Mhm.
life lessons. Said, do not miss your curfew. If you miss curfew, I'm going to get you up. We're going to go to the beach, and I'm going to take you through a workout for about 45 minutes. So for the last 3 years, Paul, none of the kids missed curfew, so they didn't miss until this year. And my wife says, "Oh, by the way, they came in late." I go, "Oh my gosh, finally!"
It's
So I,
my
yeah,
time.
so I took them through a 45-minute workout right on the beach. They did flutter kicks and push-ups and jumping jacks and burpees,
Oh, that's great.
nonstop for 45 minutes.
I
And
saw that. Did you post that
yeah,
on
I
Facebook?
did. I
You were just,
posted it. Yeah, it was a blast. I had so much fun doing it. It was pure torture for them. We're like, we didn't like having sand all over our body. I was like, okay, we'll roll around.
don't miss curfew.
Yeah, that's
It's
right.
it's a it's a cause and effect. I love
Absolutely
that.
right. Thank you, my
Uh,
friend.
Fantastic. Bobby Lockett, thanks so much for coming on. It was great talking and catching up. Great stories, and we'll see you at the reunion when we get together.
You got it, pal. Thank you so
All right.
much. Alrighty.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Courage Never Quits podcast, where any member of the class of 1986 who is willing to tell their story will be a guest. To get the word out and stay up to date on the latest episodes, hit the like and subscribe button. With over 900 living graduates, we have a lot of stories to tell, and you don't want to miss any of them. We'll see you in the next episode.